Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and yeah, I couldn't wait. Not after last episode! No! Not after last episode where we have the mystery of maybe Daisuke's family, there's a murder involved, Cho-san is no longer suspicious, but is somehow linked to Daisuke. Somehow Daisuke seems suspicious, but I'm wondering if that's a big red herring. The modern crimes director is highly sus, as well as the first division. So there's just lots of players in suspicion on the board, and I'm like, what do we do with all of this? So I just had to watch ahead. I had to. But I do have some comments before we start that I wanted to go over. Husk, we'll talk about the pronunciation. Tony Simi noted that Husk says balance limited way back in episode 4, maybe trying to crack a joke. And I was like, wait, what? But saying that maybe the AI system was telling Suzui that the balance was limited because Daisuke was on his own, didn't have any money. Like the computer was trying to crack a joke, and that's hilarious if that's the case, but I hadn't thought of it that way, so I'm glad, Tony Simi, that you pointed that out. K.A. talk about some voice actors. K.A. noted that in episode 4, the voice actor for the kid is the same one as Yashiro from Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, which glad to see some Toilet Bound representation. And that the VA for the detective in the crime drama show is the same as Kageyama from Haikyuu, who also plays Shunshin in Ace of the Diamond, and Inogi from Tsurude. What a character combination. So thank you, K.A., for that information about those voice actors. Lancer Fate 2303. I've been struggling to pronounce the AI system, and they said to pronounce it like Husk, and I was like, oh, well, that helps out a lot. I like that, so we'll just go with Husk. And then Kaylin B talked about how the fandom calls Daisuke's grandma Granby or Granby. I really love that. I was like, oh, Granby. She's all supportive of Haru. She knows Daisuke's safe as long as Haru's there. And so far, she's been proven quite right. So I don't know, though. The first division's trying to, like, pit Haru against Daisuke, and I'm like, I don't have time for this miscommunication bullshit. Don't be doing this. We know Daisuke is trying to protect Haru, and Haru's gonna probably take it the wrong way. I'm like, Miyano Mamoru, don't you let him do that, right? And then Anime Annie talked about the voice actors for the reporter. There was a lot of voice actors in episode 5 that were really good. Yeah, the voice actor for the reporter on the news was the same as Karin from Buddy Daddies. Ricardo, the guy that kills the chef and then kills himself, I don't know how I didn't recognize his voice, but he was Daisuke Ono. I was like, I love Daisuke Ono. I need to go back and rewatch it now so I can pick out his voice. And then President Alvarez's voice actor is the same as Kageyama from Twittering Birds Never Fly, as well as Mycroft from Moriarty the Patriot, and Chad from Bleach. And now, looking at that voice, I'm like, yeah, that deep voice, I get it. I can see that now. But yeah, lots of red flags. Anime Annie was really good about not, leading on or anything in their comment, but they did make note that the place that the chief took the girl out to get sushi is in a well-known, expensive, high-end district of Tokyo, which is interesting because, you're taking a girl out to a fancy dinner. No strings attached, I'm sure. But then on the other end, there's also the fact that he told Haru and the Modern Crimes Division to keep their lunches like at $3.50. And then the first division gets like the nice catering. So I do feel bad for Modern Crimes. They get the roughed into the shaft, right? But so yeah, the chief is definitely highly suspicious at this point. I'm like, I don't know what to think about them. I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm really excited to see what we're going to get in this episode, especially if it involves some backstory on Daisuke, because it is needed at this point. I feel like we've gotten a lot with Haru. We kind of know about his life and his background, but we don't know a lot about Daisuke's past. So and if it's connected with a murder case, my intrigue is piqued. So yes, I'm really excited, y'all. I hope you all are too. But special thanks to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon. These individuals help to support me in doing these reactions and give me extra support each month, which I am super, super grateful for. So I'm grateful for everybody on YouTube and everybody on Patreon who supports me, because I love talking about anime and discussing it, and these shows are so much fun. And so you all supporting me means the world, whether it's on Discord, in the comments, whatever. So a special thanks, though, as per the philanthropy tier, goes out out to these individuals. We have Edgar, we have Dana, we have Alex Cornejo, we have Be Happy, we have Kiri, we have Librarian of Lang, Shimoyama, Truck, as well as Tyrone, Anime Annie, Eric, Sunspots, Kubaloo Tech, Lou Genesis, and Translucent Men. Y'all are wonderful. I'm very, very grateful for all that you do. Thank you so much, and all of my love. So, I'm excited, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. I want to see what's gonna be happening. But we are not gonna waste any more time. We are gonna dive right in and see what we get. So, let's do this. We're going to start episode 7 of The Millionaire Detective here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this, y'all. Oh my gosh. I was really happy with this episode for a lot of reasons. One, we got backstory on Cho and the murder case. I knew we were going to get some of it this episode, but I didn't know we were going to get like as much as we did. And I was afraid that it was going to be like one little tiny segment and then we were going to have to wait till like the end of the series, which there's still a lot of mystery with this whole case that I'm like, wait, we need answers about this. And the show isn't giving us those answers yet. So I'm like, okay, fine. But I really appreciated what we got, the connections between Cho, Takei, and the director, which we'll get his name again here in a minute. And then the fact that one thing that was wonderful is at the end of this, thank goodness, Haru and Cho, I love that Haru was just like, we're just going to go direct to the source. We're going to go straight to the source. We're going to find out what's going on, and we're going to take care of all this so we don't deal with it anymore. And I was like, yes, thank you. Good. I'm really glad that we got Haru confronting Daisuke and figuring out that Daisuke is just trying to solve the case about his mom. It's his mom. He's just trying to figure out about the death of his mom and what was tied to it, because there's clearly more than meets the eye to this case. There's a lot of parts that are like, wait, why is this happening? What's going on? What is happening? And I'm very curious. I have lots of thoughts, so we need to go back through this. But yeah, so we start out this whole thing with, we need to put our players here on the board because I think it's very relative that we bring them up. So we have Takei. We have Takei, who is the chief, who right now is the chief of the 1st Division. Right, we have him. We have Cho-san. We have Cho-san, who was a cop. We know he's been a cop for 35 years. And then we have the one director who, he was originally the director of the case. We don't know if he was the director of the 1st Division, but he was the director of the case for Sayuri Kambe. And then he was demoted to the modern crimes. And he was moved to modern crimes. Almost like to get rid of them, right? And so we have these 3 players here, which we're going to talk about. We also have the whole case with Sayuri Kambe, and Whiteboard Kun needs some greasing up, clearly. He's showing his age. So we have that she died at age 34, 19 years ago. So Kambe, Daisuke was probably like, what, 5 or 6? Maybe 6 or 7. He was pretty young when his mom died, right? And she was 34. So if she was 34, I mean, he was probably like 6 or 7. But yeah, so that was 19 years ago. I like the subtle little detail that we see Takei has the ring on his finger, and then when we see him back in the present, the ring is gone, indicating that the marriage didn't work out, or we don't know for sure, right? But I like that Cho, he's like, come on now, Cho. He's like, I'm not supposed to be drinking. What I like that this series does is shows how characters age progressively. Like, Cho has aged a lot in 19 years, but Takei has as well. Takei looks young like Haru, and then when we see him in the present, he looks like a guy in his 50s, right? Just 1 cup. And it shows all the salarymen every there with the due date. And so one thing that's interesting to note is that we get a little bit with his character about the fact that he wasn't present when his kid was born. We don't know anything about his kid, whether it was a girl, whether it was a boy. It was 19 years ago, so they'd be roughly 19 years old. We don't know. But all we do know is that he wasn't there when the child was born. He was too busy working on the case. And his wife is the director's daughter. So, the wife is the director Takei, the former director's daughter. I'm getting like monster flashbacks with Tenma, like doing this and being like, oh yeah, you're married to the director's daughter, huh? Yeah, how's that going for you? And he's like, that guy is sure to get promoted. And so didn't they say, isn't he like the general now? Isn't Saiki the general now? Isn't he the case? So Cho is kind of insinuating as a joke that Takei married the daughter because he's going to move up the ladder. And Takei's like, oh, that's not the reason that I married her. And he's like, oh, there's nothing wrong with making an easier environment to work in. And Takei, I like that Cho's like, yeah, sure, you didn't marry her for that reason. I like the technology. We get like a little bit with the technology here. It's fun. And then they end up going to the murder case, right? And he's like, we'll be there in 15 minutes. And that's when they arrive on the crime scene at the apartment, right? And then they show up. And there she is in the dress, having been stabbed through the heart. Yeah. One stab to the heart. The house has been ransacked, but the execution is too clean. And I like that we see, the young guy, the director of modern crimes. He looks so young there. He hasn't gained his pot belly at the time. So we find out that she was stabbed through the heart. Stabbed once in the heart. And the crime scene looks ransacked, but still too clean. Like, it looks like it's staged, right? That's what it seems like. It looks like it is staged at this point, which is, what do we do with that? This isn't a robbery. No, and they're like, who's the victim? And he says Sayuri Kanbei, which he has, I like the director has like a little pin on his thing, which I think they all have in the department, right? Sayuri Kanbei, and then we, cut to the present. So I was wondering if it was Daisuke's mom or if it was Suzui's, but it's Daisuke's. And she is the wife of the heir of the Kanbei family, which the dad looks kind of sketch, right? We'll talk about the dad. We're handling this from the robbery front and the grudge front. The media is going to make a huge deal with this, but don't worry about them. And I like that Takei is like, the media presence is going to be very tedious. Like, it's going to get in their way to be this big, high-profile case. The media side, we might get something from the higher-ups, too. And I like that Cho has always had the dice in his hands, like the Irwin-style gambling, right? From the higher-ups. No matter who the victim is, we know what our job is. We lock up anyone guilty of wrongdoing. That's all. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff named in this first part here that was on paper, and I was like, oh my god, we need to go back and do here. So I like that the one director, he says that our job is to lock up those guilty. Like, that's the thing that we do. Now, we have these documents here. Figure B, right? It's like LIMOC, Limosi. But we have a formula. Figure A is the simple symbol. Okay? So there's this little symbol on here. Looks like almost like a little, a U for unlimited. But it's this symbol. Alright? And it's Li, M, O, and C. Okay. And they make note that recently the heir, a man named Shigemaru. So Shigemaru is the heir and Daisuke's dad. Okay. Sayuri and Shigemaru are his parents. And so they're like, I like that Cho is like, I'm clueless when it comes to foreign words and numbers. And again, there's stuff happening in the background. The heir and a scientific researcher have been engrossed in researching a dangerous material called adolium. Okay, so Shigemaru and a researcher. who we don't know, is researching this adolium that is a dangerous material, which we assume may have something to do with the case now and the whole thing with the canisters and everything else and it being possibly weaponized. Like, the Kanbei family's had 20 years to be working with this, so this is a pretty high-end case, and I wouldn't be surprised if the government has found its way to be involved with Kanbei and the others, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they've somehow, you know, gotten involved in all of this. And so they go to find out information, and we see the grandmother, who's there with the butler. We're sorry for your loss. And we see the butler there, right? And he looks rather young there. The butler looks rather dashing. We'd like to speak with Mr. Shigemaru. And she's like, oh, well, he's overseas for work. Now, at this point, they're like, is he not returning to the wife's funeral? And she's like, no, he's not. And they're like, 2 months ago, Sayuri rented a house on her own, which became the crime scene. So we have the idea that Shigemaru, who is Granbei's grandson, he is off overseas at work and is not coming to the funeral. And then we have the idea that 2 months ago, Sayuri got an apartment to herself that became the crime scene. Now, there's a lot of things that Cho kind of infers from this. He's like, why would she need an apartment that's away from the complex? Like, this complex is huge. Why would she need an apartment? Why would she want to stay away? Is she on the rocks with the relationship with her husband? And maybe there was something tied to it. I feel like Cho was implying that she was separating from Shigemaru and getting the apartment to get away from them, and that Shigemaru may have not have liked that and killed her because she might have known too much about the material they're messing with, and he figured if she was trying to leave the family, he was going to stop that. Which is kind of funny because you have Daisuke, who leaves the house in episode 4 to go stay in an apartment with Haru. So I don't know. Was she having an affair? We don't know, right? Has she been separated with Mr. Shigemaru? And the grandmother blinks, but she doesn't answer the question. And he's like, well, can we borrow a photo? And she's like, there are none. She has none. The fact that she says, she doesn't say there isn't any photos. She says, I have none. So it's kind of establishing the idea that maybe the grandmother did not have the best relationship with Shigemaru. There's a question of, did Granbei not approve of Shigemaru? Because Shigemaru looks kind of sketch. Like, Daisuke definitely got lucky and inherited all the good looks from the mom, right? From the mother. So the question is, too, you know, did she have a falling out with her son? Was he involved in some illegal activity she didn't like? So she kind of was like, you're the family heir, but you gotta get your act together. And then for him being the family heir and then committing suicide, something's rotten in the state of Denmark, right? And she doesn't want to talk about it. And I like that Cho says he understands why she's like that, because he's like, well, she's a mom. That's, you know, she's a mom. That's just, you know, what you do. And so he goes in there with the butler and he's like, oh, I have an upset stomach. I'll be right back. And then he steals the photo album from the house, right? Would a family not even have one photo of their eldest son? So they have more than one son, maybe. So that's where Suzui comes in, right? That was more like they were telling us that Shigemaru is our perpetrator. It seems like it's typical of a parent to look out for her child. So yeah, they're trying to do, he's like, the eyebrows are a bit higher. They're trying to do a sketch of the guy, and none of them seem quite right? And that's when he brings in the photo album. So we see all the photos here, and I want to get here. We see a man holding baby Daisuke. Baby Daisuke is adorable, by the way. Freaking adorable. But we see like some babies here, and we see that looks like Suzui, right? We see a woman there. We see two gentlemen. We see a man. We see two gentlemen there. One with a mustache and a girl that has shorter hair. And then we have the other woman that has the short hair, which is Daisuke's mom, right? And we see Daisuke's dad there with the facial hair. So yeah, we definitely, so there's, it seems that there's two brothers. There's Suzui's dad, and then there's Daisuke, right? Or it could be, the one man doesn't quite look like the man that's kind of a little bit more portly. It could be that Daisuke's aunt is the sister to Shigemaru, and that's where, because they're holding like little baby Suzui, right? Like she's a baby and like she's significantly younger than Daisuke. Okay, so clearly it seems like there was at least a brother and a sister, or two brothers in the Kanbei family, and Suzui, which brings up a whole string of questions too. Like, is the brother involved? Is the brother and or sister involved in this to Shigemaru? Are they connected? There seems to be like pictures of all these girls sitting around on the couch, and then like maybe two girls there. I don't know. Could it be that because it shows Daisuke being held as a baby by these two other individuals? I'm like, could it be that Suzui's family is trying to set her up to be the heir and take over the Kanbei family, which Daisuke seems to be totally fine with. Daisuke's like, y'all can have this, I don't want this. And maybe they're setting up Suzui to be the family, heir. I don't know. And maybe Suzui doesn't even realize it. We don't know, but they ask if it was somebody that was seen. And he's like, oh, we shouldn't have taken this without permission. And that's when the young man recognizes, he points to the face. And in the middle there, we see, okay, now we see Daisuke, but there's another boy there too. Interesting. So she's holding the baby there. Daisuke's mom's holding the baby, but then there's a little boy beside. So is she actually holding, who's the other little boy? What is happening? What is this family picture? Because you have the two family members there. You have Sayuri holding a baby with him, and then you have the grandma. It looks like Daisuke's the little boy to the side there. So is she holding Sayuri maybe? I guess so. For the picture? Are they siblings? Are Daisuke and Sayuri siblings? Why are you making us question such things? And they're like, okay. I like that Cho looks so pleased to have found something out. Okay. So then Saiki, he says, let me know if you find something out and keep your eyes on Nakamoto. And Nakamoto, we find out, is Cho. Nakamoto is Cho. That's just, they call him Cho-san. But Saiki is like, keep your eyes on him especially. The higher-ups are on edge. Don't get caught up in some cheap justice and lose sight of the big picture. So yeah, I find it interesting that they say, cheap justice. They say cheap justice versus the big picture. And the episode is called Money is the Root of All Evil. So what they're basically saying is, don't lose sight on just catching the murderer of this woman. Don't lose sight on the big picture, which is all the money that we're probably going to make working with the Kanbei family and this company developing this possible weaponized material. Don't lose sight of the big picture for some cheap justice. And he's like, I know, Director Saiki. And then he said, and that's when they come in. We have a report concerning Shigemaru Kanbei. Yep. And so that's when Saiki asks if Takei's been home much. He says it must be rough teaming up with Nakamoto. He's always rushing forward one way or another. He's like, please be kind to my daughter too. Like just that little flex of his power there. Like, be nice to my daughter, your wife, remember? And he's like, sure. And then he excuses himself. And that's when they go around town asking if anybody's seen Shigemaru. Which curiously enough, I don't blame anybody for not saying they've seen Shigemaru, because if he's tied to if he's tied to some nefarious activity, I don't think I'd want to admit if I saw him too. And then we have them sitting on the park bench with the watermelon pops. They have the chocolate, the watermelon seeds are chocolate. And he says, did your wife give birth? He says, yes, I got a call 2 days ago. And he says, I see. But he's not been able to see her because he's been on the case. And so then he goes back and leaves them. So Cho goes back to looking over the material again. And he's confused about what to do with all these symbols and stuff he doesn't understand. And that's when he sees that Takei is asleep on the case and he gives him his coat, which is really sweet. I like that. I love that part there. And that's when he opens up the family album and looks at the pictures. And he noticed the one picture, right? Which I want to go back to that one picture just a hair, right? Before he, yeah. So I would go back just a hair because they cover it up so quickly. Yes. So they cover it up so quickly. But there is Kanbei's parents. And they're both in lab coats with the lab markers on there, right? Right, and there's Daisuke sitting there. So both of them seem like they're connected to the research. Okay. No. Yeah, they're both in lab coats. They're connected to the research. So my theory is that the two of them were in cahoots developing whatever this adolium is or whatever. She probably realized that things... She looks a lot like Suzui, like with short hair. She looks an awful lot like Suzui. But she probably realized that things were going south and were not going maybe how she thought they were, so she tried to talk her husband out of it. Maybe both of them were targeted by two other people. We don't know. There's so much that's still a mystery behind. It's either like... The thing of it is, why would Kanbei kill himself after killing her? Like, unless it was an accident. Either it was an accident and he felt horrible and killed himself, or they were both targeted by either family or by an outside force that they were connected with the Adolium for, or he killed her intentionally and then was targeted by somebody else. I feel like that's going to be the big thing to come out of the wash. Like, what are we going to find out about them in this? But yeah, on the back of it is the key that supposedly is to one of the lockers. And so the only other person that knows about the locker other than Takei is the director, is Kiyomizu. That's what it is, Kiyomizu. Wasn't Mizu like the name, Mizuo, the name of one of the companies? Wasn't it something like Mizuo? I'm like, is Kiyomizu, is he tied to this? Is he tied to one of those companies? Is that it? Is that what's going on? I don't know how I feel about that. But I'm like, there's only two people that could have possibly taken the key. One is Kiyomizu and one is Takei. Like, they're the only ones that knew about the key, knew where it was, knew about the pilfered photo album, and knew that it likely goes to somewhere important. He's like, and of course, Kiyomizu does bring up a good point that they took something from the house without a warrant. They can't use it as evidence. He's like, so you basically stole something, and now, even if it does lead us to something, we can't use it as evidence in the case. So he does bring up a really good point with that. I was like, yeah, that's not a bad point to make. But with that being said, they still go around looking for Shigemaru. Like, they go to all these different stations, talk to everybody, they go to the coin. Oh, so we say they go to the coin lockers. Oh, I want to go back. Don't go in too deep. I want to go back to that scene. Yep. So when they go to Shin Okubo Station, we see Cho walking around asking if people have seen people in house to house and looking over everything. And then we see Takei at the coin lockers. So Takei took the key, right? That's what we're led to believe, that he took the key and went to the lockers. Right? Is that the case? Is that what we're led to believe? Because I think we're going to come back to that later on, that he went to the lockers and then left. Meanwhile, Cho is they're both still looking for the person. And then Cho goes back to that photograph of them. And then wondering what to do. We found Shigemaru Kanbei. We got a reference for the key. Did you take him into custody? Well, we were able to in a way. Yep. And then there was a farewell note and he committed suicide. Okay. And the dental matches. So he's like, let's hurry up and go open the locker. And that's when they notice that the key is gone. And he says the key's gone. Now, Takei says, no way, where'd the key go? But did he take the key? The goods might still be in that locker, so he goes to get it. And I feel like Cho at that point is like, okay, well, somebody took it. So it was either, did Takei take it or was it Kiyomizu? One of those two took it. It couldn't have been anybody else. Nobody else knew where the key was. But Cho, by the end of it, I love they keep spitting the seeds. And what's really cool about this is that it goes back to that vision. So the two that are on the park bench, like what a cool trippy scene. The two on the park bench at the end, when we go back to the vision of Takei in the future, the two on the park bench turn into Cho and Haru. That was such a cool visual. I loved that. It was so trippy. They decide the investigation headquarters will be dissolving soon. With the material witness committing suicide, the investigation would close. And the mass media stayed quiet because of the pressure from the family. And Cho's like, what was this all about? He's like, I heard how director Saiki asked Kiyomizu to keep you on watch, Cho-san. Because he was going to get too involved. I'm sure he told the director about the key too. And I like that Cho's like, yeah, he had to. That was part of... I like that Cho wasn't ever... He wasn't bitter about it. He wasn't bitter about what Kiyomizu did because he's like, that's just his job as a cop. He had to report it. That was how things work. He had to look out for his job as well. He's like, I'm in no position to talk about it. And they're like, who took the key? And he says, it doesn't matter who, no matter who it was, it's the same thing. It's just stopping their case. He's like, you should do what you can in the first division. So I guess Kiyomizu did take the key and not Takei. And then he gives him, he's like, for your new baby. And I love that look from him. He's like, to become a father who you could be proud of. And then we cut back to the present. But before we do that, it shows like the very first desk with the two of them. So Kiyomizu was sent down to Modern Crimes along with Cho. And I think the only reason for that is because they don't want to fire Cho and it be suspicious, but they want to keep Cho under their thumbs. What better way to do that than Kiyomizu? And Kiyomizu's probably like, well, I'm sure he's getting a lot of money regardless because he could take the girl out on the fancy dinner date. So I'm sure they paid Kiyomizu off to go down here, stay under wraps, and keep an eye on Cho. I'm pretty sure that that's all what was going on. I still don't trust Kiyomizu at all. And so we cut back to the present with Modern Crimes. And that's when Cho shows up. But everything got back and going when Kanbei showed back up. And there's a string called the Kanbei family that's leading it all together. Everything's connected. Everything's connected. So, I'm really glad that this episode did not let Daisuke's actions be misconstrued as being like he's the bad guy. For a second I thought I was going there and I was like, oh come on, you know Daisuke's not the bad guy in all of this. Not like we think, right? Because he's just trying to find out the secrets about his mom's death. But he hasn't contacted them. I'm sure Daisuke knows that there's corruption within the division. He doesn't want to get involved if he doesn't have to be. And I'm sure that he's trying to plot out right now a strategy to solve the case. So the best thing for him to do is to stay out of everybody's hair and not get involved so that Haru's safe and Cho is as well. And Haru's like, are you really suspecting Kanbei in all this? And that's when Takei shows up. He's like, I wanted to talk to Cho-san. And so he's like, the murder is connected with the case. Clearly, right? You think so too, don't you? And he's like, I wanted to repay what I owed you 19 years ago. I like that Cho is just thinking, like, mulling it over, like, what do I do? What do I do? And he's so little. He goes over there. And that's when Takei's like, I used to work under Cho. And I learned all these things. But as a result of this case, I stayed in the first division while Cho left. And I heard from director Kiyomizu too. To arrest the perpetrator of this case is my way of repaying his kindness. So you say. He goes into the shadows when he says that. So Takei says that he wants to repay Cho by arresting the perp. But he was in the shadows when he said that, right? And then the light comes back out. So are we Are we sure Takei is being truthful there 100%? Amura was arrested because she was the setup by a third party who took it. Yeah, I mean, he is right about Daisuke taking her in under that presumption, right? But everything regarding her blowing up, nobody can check what happened before it. All the other footage has been deleted from before. The footage before this has been deleted. The surveillance camera footage for all routes leading up to the parking lot based on the timestamp have been deleted too. So yeah, it's like somebody knows that Daisuke was going to look in on the case. So there's a question there, right? And then that's when I like that he just answers the phone from Haru. Like, Daisuke's been avoiding everything, but then Haru calls and he's like, "Yep." Like, "Sup, boyfriend? What's up? How's it going?" "There's no need for me to go. Is there something you're hiding from us?" And he's got it on call on speakerphone with Cho. "You're behind Amura's car losing control, aren't you?" And he says, "Correct." And I like that he's just honest. So Haru at that point is like, okay, he was honest about that, so we need to go investigate what's going on. And of course the gate is shut and Haru's like, "Screw this, we're gonna ram it." And then, like, I'm glad they weren't hurt. And I can see Daisuke being mad because he shows up and Daisuke's like, "Why did you come here? You could have been hurt. What are you doing? Like, why did you run into the gate? What's going on?" That was great. Them just showing up and the car is completely just wrecked. And then they both get out and they're being targeted and Daisuke's like, "What are you doing?" And then Haru's like, "Well, you can arrest us. You're police if you really don't want us involved." And that's such a move from Haru, but Daisuke is not going to call the police on them because they know that Haru will be like cut out. There's a possibility he may actually literally be cut out if he gets too involved. And so Daisuke, it's kind of at the point where Daisuke is like, "Fine, you and Cho are way too involved now. You can't back out. You're going to be in danger." So I like that Daisuke is just like, "Fine, if you want to put yourself in danger, Haru, don't say I didn't warn you. I guess we'll get you involved." I love it, right? I love it. And he's like, "Fine, I'll call it off." And then Haru's like, "What is the point of this? What are you after? Tell me." And he's like, "You believe everything can be solved with money and you don't care about other people's feelings." And I'm like, well, he does care about your feelings, Haru, because he didn't want you to get, fired. So, but Daisuke would never admit that in a million years. So I'm like, He's like, "But you don't willingly commit any crimes either. So regardless of me disapproving of your methods, I know you're not a criminal, so what's up?" And I love that he just stares down Daisuke and Daisuke's like, "Just trying to find out who killed my mom. The truth about my mother's death 19 years ago. That's what I'm after. This case and Amura's death are linked. The silencing it." Yep, and that's when Haru realizes that Cho and him are on the same wavelength. The string called the Kanbei family. And Haru's like, "Oh, what?" And I like that Haru is like, okay. I love that Haru looks over at Cho like, okay, Daisuke's in on this, but is he trying to figure out what's going on? Is he somebody we can rely on? And Cho seems to be thinking, okay, I want to get to the bottom of this. What's happening? I love it. And that's when we go to Takei. Now, Takei does not have a wedding ring on anymore. So, are we leading to believe that he is divorced? Divorced from his wife? Probably. Saiki is no longer director, so... And also it makes it very clear now that Takei has like some bags under his eyes, like he hasn't slept. That may have been, more to it than that in just this case. So then I like that Hoshino shows up, and Hoshino's really good in this. He talks about how Kanbei was in the dash cam footage, like he was tailing her, right? I like that we get Hoshino providing that information, but then that seems to be all that Takei needs to convict Daisuke of killing Amura. And I like that Hoshino goes, well, I don't think we can determine it with just this evidence. I like that Hoshino, for all his quirks, is kind of like, well, we can't just convict Daisuke by this one thing. We've got to prove, we need more proof than just this. He's like, he made the car go out of control to arrest her and then murdered her afterwards. There's nobody who could do anything like that besides him. But we know that Daisuke doesn't have access to everything. So there is very well likely somebody else in the Kanbei family who does have access, and we just don't know about it yet. But I like the Hoshino's eyes being like, I don't know. I feel like Hoshino is suddenly in Takei's place from 19 years ago, and Takei is in Saiki's place from 19 years ago. Like, it's just like this generational thing, right? And Haru is kind of in the same boat as Cho-san. So it's very weird. And then he goes to his car. And at first, I thought he was going to blow up. Like, he looks over to the car explosion. I thought at first that when the gas started seeping in, that he was going to blow up. That they were going to kill him. I was like, that whoever is behind this was going to get rid of Takei. And I was like, what is happening? But no. Then he blacks out and has this, like, virtual world vision, right? And they show him, it's like his memory is combined with his virtual world. It's weird. And he's back. He's like, what happened? He's back at the old department. And then he goes down and sees the key. And it seems like it brings up the coin lockers, right? Brings up the coin lockers. And what do we see with it? He says Takei. And there's Cho. And he says, it's this locker. Hurry up and open it. But he says, I can't. If I look, I'll be murdered. So Takei knows. He knows that the locker is key to this. And so it seems like Cho telling him to open up the locker was Cho in the real world being like, go ahead and open it. And he's like, no. He knew if he opened it, he was going to be murdered. If I stay here, he'll. And he's like, he? Who's he? So he knows there's somebody else involved in this, right? He's like, I don't know. It's true, I really don't know. Would you recognize him if you saw his face? He's like, that's, oh. And then we go out to the thing, yeah. Where he has the pop. And they're sitting there together. Again, it's Cho-san again. And he's spitting into the thing. And that's when we see, he says, Cho-san, is this what you call the... He's like, am I dead? And he's like, no, you're not dead. You're just, you know, in a very technological state. And he says, it's for your new baby. And God, the sad look on his face when he takes it. Like he already knows what's happened. Oh, that's kind of heartbreaking the way he looks. And then he drops the key. And they're like, Mr. Takei. And that's when he sees Amura. You were the one who killed me, right? And he's like, no. And I don't think Takei killed her. I don't. I think Takei is trying to wrap things up quickly. And if he gets rid of Daisuke, it'll solve everything. But I don't think he killed Amura. But I think he might know who did. It's like, if I had known things would end up this way. But you need to report to him. And he enters the number. Yeah. Okay, like he has to report to the person. Like Saiki knew, right? And that's when he sees, yeah, Cho and Haru. I just love how badass they look coming out in the sunlight. And the phone, he's like, why? And that's when he wakes up from the virtual world that he was in. And I love that Daisuke has those sunglasses on again. Like he's analyzing everything. And then there is Suzui and Cho and Haru. Leave it to Kanbei technology. A virtual world projected in your retina. And so Tatsunori Saiki deceased. So he's the late Saiki. He supposedly is dead. Interesting. Why was he reporting it to a dead man? Yeah, I want to go back and read what that said about him. Yeah. What did he say there? I want to see that little database. Tatsunori Saiki, gender male, occupation, former director of MPD, date of death, February 4th, 9:42, cause of death, car accident. So February 4th, we don't get the date, but so we don't know if it was like recent or what it was, but he supposedly is dead. His father-in-law is dead, and the cause of death was a car accident. What? It says 7/23. You called the late director. Why? You married his daughter. You had ambition. That's not a bad thing at all. You need power to accomplish justice. That's an unmistakable fact. And he's like, that's not it. Was he just following orders? And that's when Cho just like takes the knife and goes, were you able to become a father you could be proud of? I'm like, damn, dude, what the fudge? But yeah, so I think that Takei was simply following orders. I think he was just doing what he was told. And then Haru's like, okay, what do we do now? And that's what we got. 7 billion yen. Oh my god, the costs incurred with the virtual reality. The virtual reality is like 7 billion yen. That's hilarious. That's what the main cost is. The VR and the VR equipment. Of course it is. I think it's interesting that we have this talk about fathers in this episode, because you have Takei, who's a father who doesn't have time, for his kid, the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. And then you have Cho being like, be a father that you would be proud of, which it doesn't seem like he was. And then you have Daisuke, whose father seems real sketchy. Shigemaru seems super sketch. Just saying. Seems like a sketchy dude. And Daisuke clearly has some issues with him, possibly, especially concerning the death of his mom. And then we have, the idea of these like pseudo father figures. So you have like the director being the father-in-law to Takei, and Takei maybe like, I think Takei like did whatever the director told him to because he was married to his daughter and had ambition. Then you have Kiyomizu, who kind of seems like a son of Psyche as well. Then you have Hoshino, who's kind of like taking after Takei. You have Haru and how Takei has treated Haru like a son. Like there's just been a lot going on, right? So lots of father figures in this episode, but there's obviously the Adolium. There's something going on with it. There's something connected to the Kanbei family. I'm curious if Suzui's family is involved in all of this. We've not really seen much of them except in the pictures. I'm curious if maybe they want the Kanbei family heir and family name, and the grandmother's like, and Daisuke doesn't want it. So I don't know why it would be an issue if that were the case, because Daisuke has said he doesn't want the family business. He would just give it to Suzui, I'm assuming. I don't know why that's a problem. Unless this is one of those families that's like, a woman can't have it. And it's like, oh God. Like, no! Suzui's capable, I'm sure. But I'm so fascinated to see what about the Kanbei family we don't know yet, that we still have to learn. How this is going to tie in. I think Takei is a member of circumstance. I think Takei was just a yes man, doing whatever Psyche told him. Why Psyche died, if the car crash was an accident or intentional, I don't know. Seems like with everything going on, it might have been intentional. And then seeing like, where is Kiyomizu, the mastermind behind all this? Is he the one with the Kanbei connections? What's in the locker? What's going on? I don't know. Hit my foot on there. But I'm really excited to know more, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to not watch ahead, y'all, so y'all have to forgive me. But we're going to do a live stream anyway, so whatever comments don't get answered by the time I finish the series, we'll save for the live stream, so it'll be fine. But yeah, I'm so excited. This mystery is deepening. I'm so glad that Kanbei talked with Haru. I'm glad Daisuke and Haru are seemingly on the same page. It wasn't Daisuke that killed Amura. He's just trying to figure out, it seems like he's being framed, and we're trying to figure out what's going on, so I'm so excited to see what's going to happen next. But I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of the Millionaire Detective Balance Unlimited. Bye!